What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here with Nate Bailey. We are back again to discuss everything that went down in week 12 in the college football streets. Nate, it was an exciting week. I think the theme of the weekend was near chaos, near upsets. I know there were a few of them, as well as many blowouts. I had a lot of fun watching those close games, the ones that came down to the wire. But how was your week 12?
It was good. Let me check my record here. I went 6-6, 4-6, excuse me. So not horrible. Definitely a couple of near disaster spots. A couple did end up going down to the wire. But yeah, really exciting weekend of college football overall. And definitely getting a clear picture of how things are starting to look here.
I'm going to say my bets ahead of time because I always forget when we talk about the actual games. It was 5-5-1 for me, a pretty good week for closing line value that didn't always come to fruition. It was a good week, midweek. Maction was great, had Western Michigan and Toledo there. Clemson, Louisville, that under came through, came down not really to the wire, but it was a little greasy at times there. Georgia Tech, Boston College soared over, and then I had Notre Dame. As far as losses go, did play an over in Virginia and Duke just with the anticipation that Chandler Morris would play. He did. The line moved. It didn't matter. Duke couldn't do their part. Couple red zone possessions stalled for them. More than a couple turnovers, which is the story of Duke season. I made a really bad choice to take an under in Texas Tech UCF. I was kind of toying around with how I wanted to play that game before the slate started. I knew I wanted something on Texas Tech and whether they were going to cover the 23.5 or hold UCF to 0 points or something like that, which they ended up doing. I thought the safest play was an under, but it turns out when Texas Tech doesn't kick field goals every possession, they're going to put up 50 points, which they very much did. And then I had an over in Texas, Georgia. Georgia certainly did their part. Texas did not. There was a chance that came through at the end, but Texas, basically all their second half possessions stalled. Georgia stole a possession on an onside kick. And I know we'll get into all that, but just those are the results ahead of time before I forget. Anything else for you before we dive right in with the SEC?
Nothing else really on my end just yet.
All right. So we'll do a lot of playoff talk. Obviously, that is the forefront of the discussions right now. And it's going to be some tough conversations for some people, but we'll kind of lead that off with some of the results we saw. And the biggest one was probably that South Carolina Texas A&M game. The crazy comeback is the story. South Carolina puts up 30 points in the first half, and Texas A&M cuts the deficit all the way, wins by 1 point. Could have been worse, honestly. Texas A&M had a fumble in the red zone on a trick play they tried to use deep in the second half to go up potentially by like 8-9 points, depending on what they did with the point after. But overall, I thought it was pretty stark that you still saw a 90% post-game win expectancy for A&M. They crushed South Carolina in the yardage battle, and I think it kind of makes sense when you look at this at the end of the day. One of the touchdowns for South Carolina was on an unblocked Dylan Stewart pressure. And I don't know what the design was on that play. It was definitely, they were trying to read Dylan Stewart for whatever reason. I don't know why you leave the best player on South Carolina's team unblocked, but they ran like the slow developing mesh play, and it ended up being a strip sack for a touchdown. So there was a little bit of weirdness, I think, that went against A&M. They dropped so many passes too. But what'd you see in this game? I thought it was the good kind of win A&M needed for their playoff at this point.
Oh, for sure. Good win. Near disaster for him, though, here, going down 30-3 at halftime. But definitely an important comeback win here. There was one play in the third quarter that Bethel Roman dropped. If you look up the field, that was an easy 6, but he ended up making up for it a couple plays later there with that huge touchdown. But yeah, big comeback win, a game that it wasn't a must-win situation, but definitely one that you want to see, especially with Texas still on their schedule here at the end. But very impressed with how they were able to rally. This was one of my wins on the weekend. I took them live at plus 11.5 just before that third quarter got started. So I was, again, very happy with what I saw second half with them. But South Carolina battled, man. This is a team that's kind of dead in the water for the rest of the year, but still showed some fight, but they ended up just losing to a better team yesterday.
I saw some crazy screenshots of live money lines you could have grabbed with A&M. I thought about it. I was a coward, though, and didn't end up actually pulling the trigger on. I just thought the deficit was too high. Maybe like what you did, grabbing an 11 live. That was a really sharp play by you. And to your point, it was an important game for A&M. If they would have lost it, it wouldn't have really changed anything. We'll kind of get to a similar situation with Alabama, but A&M very firmly in control of their own playoff destiny right now. You mentioned the Texas game at the end of the season. It's more impactful for Texas than it is A&M right now. Unless something crazy happens, they've basically punched their ticket to the college football playoff, and it's nice to see them overcome a 4-turnover game that, yeah, I mean, you need those kind of games if you're going to do anything in the playoffs. That you're going to run into adversity, so it's nice to see them respond. And Marcel Reed especially, I think this was the first time I've seen him mount a comeback like that. They've been playing from ahead, and when these situations happened in year one last year, it was not always pretty. So proud of Marcel Reed, impressed. Anything else?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in this league, you're going to get games like this. And, it is important to be able to see that, you're having some adversity here, especially towards the end of the year, but being able to overcome some of that adversity and actually come out with some wins is pretty important to see, especially as we inch closer here to those playoffs.
100% agree. Peyton in the chat, A&M is the most overrated SEC team since Miss-State was number one. I'll just say this, that Notre Dame non-con win is carrying a lot of weight. They have not played the most rigorous SEC schedule. They do not have a lot of common opponents with the other teams at the top, but that's kind of what you get when your conference is 16 teams right now. But yeah, that's all I'll say on it. We'll talk about the playoff in a second. The other big game that at least was close, Oklahoma takes down Alabama, and they do so with a 5% post-game win expectancy. Alabama nearly doubled them up in yards. This was the weirdest, and obviously the 3 turnovers from Bama, they had, like you can play an amazing game for 90% of the time, 95% of the time, but if your 3 costliest plays are turnovers that immediately lead to Oklahoma points, like you're going to lose the game. And finally, it bit Alabama. They've been in situations like this before. The Georgia game was similar where it was the inverse. They had a negative post-game win expectancy, at least below 50%. With Georgia at 80%, I believe it was. So they kind of traded those win losses here. And it's a big win for Oklahoma to keep their playoff hopes alive. What'd you see here?
Big win for Oklahoma. I actually cashed my win total ticket for them on the year yesterday.
Oh, I forgot about that.
So didn't count that in my weekend wins, but I was actually pretty happy with that at the end there. Another theme with Bama, I know we talked about this a little bit last week, their inability to run the football right now. Jam Miller, 9 carries, 27 yards yesterday. That's just not going to get it done against some of these elite teams. Mateer didn't really stick out too much on the stat sheet. Again, I know we talk about those turnovers from Alabama, but you make mistakes like that in a game like this, you are not going to win those games at all. So, yeah, big win for them to keep them alive here in the playoff race. But it's going to definitely come down to these last couple weeks with still so many teams still alive right now in the SEC.
It wasn't Ty Simpson's best game. He took 4 sacks and only 13 pressures. The offensive line, for whatever reason, has a lot of trouble run blocking, but pass blocking, they've been decent. He held onto the ball for quite a long time in this game, so the pressure to sack ratio up at 31%. You'd like to see him get rid of some of those balls. I understand late in games, you feel like you need to make a play, you hold onto the ball longer in an attempt to win. So maybe I'm reading too much into that, but it wasn't Ty Simpson's best game. And to your point, when you can't run the ball consistently, Jam Miller had a really bad drop in this game, one of 2 that Alabama had on the day. When that happens and you can't run the ball and everything is on Ty Simpson's shoulders, like even as a Heisman candidate, at some point you're just going to lose a game in the SEC. In Oklahoma, they did not have R. Mason Thomas in this game. Taylor Wine, who's a rotational pass rusher for them, I mean, he's an elite recruit. I shouldn't be super surprised. He came down with one of those huge sacks and turnovers in this game, which that's been Alabama's problem the whole year. You pass block well for most of the game, and then you have one really costly play in there. But one big talking point with Bama, and if people aren't well-versed on the current SEC tiebreakers, which I get it, man. There's 16 teams, but there's so few common opponents between these teams now. Basically, everything comes down to tiebreakers. Alabama has still, like, as long as they win out, like a 90% chance to be in the SEC championship game because of the tiebreakers. It comes down to, like, some opponent record or something. I don't know what it is, but that loss really did not affect Alabama. They are more than likely playing Texas A&M for the SEC championship as long as they don't slip up again. Anything else on either of these teams?
Nothing else really from this game too much here. Yeah.
I am holding both Alabama and A&M futures for the SEC. So I am really, really hoping that is the game that is played.
Oh, yeah.
The rest of the SEC was not super exciting. The biggest game coming into the day was Texas, Georgia. Georgia routs Texas, and it was not pretty. Not a great game for Arch. I don't think a lot of the skill position players or the offensive line were doing him a ton of favors. They couldn't run the ball. Even worse than Bama, 1.4 yards per carry in this game. Georgia stole a possession on an onside kick. It was kind of just a coaching masterclass from Kirby over Sarkisian. What'd you see here?
So if I had to pick right now, I actually think Georgia is looking like the best team in this conference. And one thing I was actually looking forward to looking at with Georgia yesterday was how their defense was going to play. Because again, we've talked about their offense a lot. They've been a well-oiled machine here this past month, but incredibly impressed by how that defense was able to come out, hold Texas to 10 points. Not the worst game of the year from Arch, but just an overall dominant performance in all phases by the Bulldogs. This was one game I did bet. I did bet this over. That last possession from Texas at the end, it didn't really look like they were trying very hard. I don't know if that was just a game plan thing at that point, or they were just kind of tucking their tail and kind of writing it off at that point. But a little disappointed in that. I thought that was going to be able to come home, but overall dominant performance by the Dogs. Again, I think this is the best team in the SEC right now. We talk about tiebreakers, everything like that. That Bama loss is certainly hurting them. But if they went out, they take care of business, they should be fine heading into the playoffs.
That's another thing. They're not dead. But before we get there, one other thing that really tormented Texas in this game, 5 drops, 15% of Arch Manning's on-target passes drops. So that does not go down into the box score. It affects like his completion percentage, his yards per attempt, every one of his statistics, overall yardage. And he still threw for 250 yards. I mean, this was probably going to be a 300-yard game for Arch if he didn't suffer from these drops. And DeAndre Moore had one. Ryan Wingo had one. CJ Baxter had one out of the backfield. The backup tight end, for whatever reason, I don't know why he's getting targeted. His only target on the day was a drop. So that was definitely a problem. I have one question and just want to get your opinion on this. Texas run offense, so Baxter, Wisner, their O-line, have not been great this year. Georgia's D-line is basically one guy, Kristen Miller. And I was impressed with Georgia's defense, but this is kind of like a chicken or the egg situation. Do you put more on Georgia improving on defense or this on Texas's O-line?
I put more, for this game specifically, I put more on Georgia improving. Because, again, we've seen this team in a lot of these shootout-style games so far. So the fact that they were able to clean a lot of that up, especially in the front seven, I definitely think it was more of a Georgia improving as opposed to Texas just being able to struggle there, especially on the offensive line.
I kind of agree with you because a lot of the times we've seen Texas struggle running the ball, it's been someone's out, less than 100%. Anything else on this game? Otherwise, there's a lot of blowouts to discuss.
Also a very clean game from the Dogs penalties wise. Only one penalty, 15 yards. I know in a game like this, you might not really look at that stat, but being able to clean things up from a penalty perspective is really important as we're heading into these final weeks here.
I like the way they're playing just from a personnel perspective. They're very multiple. You see them use multiple tight ends. Lucky returned in this game. They're getting a lot out of like even an Ellis Williams, who I believe is a freshman, 5-star freshman. So if you're going to get snaps out of him, I mean, like wheels up for Georgia. I've been super impressed with them. And again, just circling back, they had like a 80% post-game win expectancy against Alabama. As far as the other results in this conference, basically everything else was a blowout or blowout adjacent. Like even the Ole Miss Florida game, it ends up being a 10-point game, but Ole Miss had a 96% post-game win expectancy. The box score might fool you here if you didn't watch this game. It was never actually in doubt. There was basically almost holding them at arm's length the entire game. Another good game from Trinidad, 8.6 yards per attempt. I mean, Kewan Lacey's just having a monster season on the ground. I thought this was going to be a real issue for them this year, and it has not been. They've been able to run the ball. Trinidad helps in this regard, but man, impressed with Ole Miss. They have a pretty easy schedule the rest of the way. What'd you see here?
Yeah, the score doesn't really stick out to you, but just a good win by Ole Miss. You know, Florida's been a team this year that's been able to trip a lot of teams up, a lot of really good teams. So I was impressed that they were able to take care of business here. You know, like you touched on, Kewan Lacey, 224 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. That's going to be really, really, really important for them heading into these final weeks here. But yeah, good game from Ole Miss. Important win for them. Probably if they lost the game, they would have been in deep trouble here. So I was impressed with that. I didn't bet this game. I was thinking about it, but I was a little scared with that spread. But yeah, overall good game for the Rebels.
Then they didn't cover. So good dodge by you. I made the same decision. It was going to be Ole Miss or pass. The only other outcome, I'm just going to mention it in passing. Arkansas has done this like 6 times this year. They had a 64% post-game win expectancy against LSU, turned the ball over 3 times and lost by a point. Like, how many times can the Razorbacks – now, Arkansas did cover if you took them, so I shouldn't be complaining. I didn't bet the game because Arkansas is terrifying. But my goodness, man, like, Arkansas should probably have like 5 wins. If they don't lose every game they're supposed to, they're on the verge of bowl eligibility. But let's talk SEC in general because there's a lot to get into for playoffs, SEC championship, which looks like right now it's going to be A&M versus Bama if everything holds serve because of tiebreakers. Bama holds over Georgia and Ole Miss currently. Those would be the teams, if Bama loses for whatever reason, would benefit the most. Georgia, then Ole Miss. But the real problem that you have the rest of the way here is none of these teams play each other with the exception of A&M playing an outside looking in Texas. Even if you go down the ranks, the 2 lost teams in this conference, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, no common opponents the rest of the way. And a lot of that is because, like Georgia's done with conference play now. They have 2 non-con games to close the year. The last one's important for playoff seeding because it's Georgia Tech, who's ahead of the ACC. But man, there is a scenario. Let's say A&M wins against Texas and everyone else wins the games they're favored in. You could finish this season with 6 SEC teams with 2 losses, 6 of them. What does the playoff committee do with that?
So the hard part with this situation right now, and this is kind of what we're going to see for years to come, because these big conferences now, there's just no way all these teams can play each other, right? I mean, if you look at the Big Ten, well, I know we'll talk about them in a minute here, but
they have more teams.
Yeah, you have so many teams. You have 16 teams in this conference. It's impossible for everyone to play each other. Tiebreakers can get confusing with these records. At that point, for the playoff race and then for voting, it's going to be a lot of recency bias. So, I mean, they're going to probably look at that last month. They are going to look at the tiebreakers, but at the same time, it really is impossible to sort through these standings, especially at the top, when a lot of these teams don't play each other. You know what I mean? So it's going to be tough. No one can really afford to lose now. Even that Georgia Tech game, I wouldn't be Georgia going into that and being like, oh, well, we can lose and be fine. They certainly can't. But it's just tough with these bigger conferences now. It's impossible for everyone to play each other. So it does give the committee a pretty tough job evaluating which teams they actually do want to put in now.
So as of today, if chalk holds serve, I did go ahead and look at all of the look-ahead lines for all of these teams that play over the next 2 weeks. If everyone wins the games they're supposed to win, you have 4 SEC teams getting in because of the current rankings. You go down the list, and of the teams we just mentioned, the 6 of them that have 2 losses, the only one who's outside the top 12 is Vanderbilt. And now one of them is going to lose because presumably Texas will lose to Texas A&M, although Texas is at home. The game might be a little weird. We'll see on that. But let's just say Texas loses and drops behind Oklahoma. You still have 4 teams minimum. Maybe 5, depending on what like a Notre Dame does the rest of the way, because Notre Dame is currently 9. So if you just go based on that, you get 3 Big Ten, 4 SEC, and Notre Dame. And if Notre Dame loses, the path is open for a 5th one because you still have Texas, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt all ranked ahead of Georgia Tech. Most of them are ranked ahead of BYU. And then you go down the list, like Miami's behind them. Michigan and USC are afterthoughts. Like they need to pull a huge upset to even be in contention, whether they finish with 2 losses or not. So there, a lot of these teams that people will talk about from the ACC, the Big 12, are just boxed out unless there's chaos. Because unless the committee does not put teams in true to their pre-rankings, and maybe they will do that. Maybe there's a situation where BYU goes to the conference title, loses, but they're conference title runner-up, and they want to reward that instead of putting in like a 2-loss Oklahoma who played for nothing. I don't know how they're going to treat it, but it's going to be a huge dilemma moving forward for this team because of kind of what they've done. They sort of tied their own hands by putting so many SEC teams this high, which I don't disagree with, but it just creates a situation and probably a lot of fighting among the media. But anything on that?
No, I certainly don't disagree with it either. It's just going to create a lot of conversation that they didn't really get it right at the end, I think, unfortunately. So definitely going to be a tough, interesting last couple of weeks here. But, it's with this playoff system now, it's never going to be perfect. They're going to do the best they can. But, yeah, all these teams at the top right now, it's certainly not giving their job. It's certainly not making their job very easy right now at all.
I hear that. Let's move on to the other marquee conference. We have the Big Ten. The biggest game in this conference was your Iowa Hawkeyes taking on USC. I'll kind of let you take it away. The only thing that stood out to me was Iowa 55% post-game win expectancy over USC. But go ahead. You are the Iowa whisperer.
Oh, yeah. So this is a team, for one, took a 14-0 lead, was up 21-10 at halftime, and ended up blowing it at the end there. But as a fan, you look at this team and you're like, okay, we want to be a playoff team every year, right? But if you just look at the construct of the roster right now, right, they're just so far away from being a playoff team. Coming into this game, I was very concerned with how those corners were going to defend Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon. Mekhi Lemon had a monster game. They currently do not have corners on the edge that can guard these elite level receivers. Also, from the offense, Gronowski's still not able to really use a vertical pass game right now. I don't really know if it's more a game plan situation right now, or if it's him just not being confident in his throws, or if it's still something with his leg. You know what I mean? But disappointing for sure. Again, you do kind of get your hopes up with this team, wanting them to be a playoff team, but the build of this roster right now, they're so far away from actually being at that level right now. USC is a good team. They got a very, very, very important game coming up this weekend. Again, I was disappointed, but I'm not surprised because again, they're just not there yet. You know what I mean? And it's not we're unlucky in these closing minutes here with these games. They're just not at that level to get to that, to take those next steps right now and become that playoff team.
I think I might be more optimistic than you are. I think they're a QB away. I think you can not excuse the defensive lapses, but most good teams have plays like that where they give up a big play here and there. But I think with Iowa, you feel it more because the offense is struggling so much. And it's not even just the downfield pass game it's non-existent really outside of a broken play here or there, but it's the underneath stuff with Gronowski, man. Like that interception he threw, which was kind of a weird one. It bounces off the guy's shin to the USC defender, which is definitely a fluke. But that was also what did he run, like a curl route or something?
Mm-hmm.
It was
a lot of these throws, they're just at the knees or they're entirely in the dirt. These are 5-10 yard throws that he's just not able to make. And those do make or break games sometimes here. And as we've seen, they have.
In the chat, Iowa's been a quarterback away since World War II. Listen, man, I will not hear the Nate Stanley slander. I will not. The guy had a cup of coffee in the NFL, but you might be right. Hopefully they can recruit one, man. Whatever happened to that guy they recruited last year, not to get off topic, they recruited a 4-star, changed his position, and then he transferred out.
They actually just signed, they have a 4-star that's committed next year. So that'll be good. Hopefully
one thing you can say what you want about Iowa. They're not broke.
No, they're not broke. But yeah, they could be in the chat 4 plays away from being 10-0. You also certainly can make that argument as well.
Yeah, again, you feel those 4 plays because they don't have an offense.
Mm-hmm.
The other game that was pretty interesting was Michigan Northwestern played at Wrigley Field. Michigan overcomes 5 turnovers somehow. And a lot of these were short fields for Northwestern. Shame on them for not punching in more points off of those. It was kind of a good game for Bryce Underwood. I think it's the best he's looked all year. It's about time they put Marsh on the field, man. Their 4-star freshman receiver. He is a difference maker. He had 190 yards receiving in this game. They could not cover him. He was making boundary catches, toe tap catches. They just haven't had a player like that since Nico Collins, who they also didn't use. So it's about time you see somebody catch the ball for Michigan, not named. And Colson Loveland was there, but he was hurt the entire season. So anyway, very happy with the growth for Underwood. I think it's going to be they need to beat Ohio State to get in the playoff. I think that's a very tall task, even with the track record. Anything you saw in this game?
No, I'm right there with you. I thought this was a great game to really see growth from Underwood. There was a couple turnovers in the game, that's going to happen. But yeah, really good game for Michigan to be able to pull out there at the end. Northwestern, they've been a tough team this year. They've been hanging with a lot of these higher level teams throughout the season. So they've been much improved this year as well. But yeah, I really like what I saw. Nice coming down there to the wire, just having to watch right there. I didn't actually bet it at all, but it was nice to see that growth with him throughout this game and throughout the season as well.
Absolutely, and I say they're likely on the outside looking in that everything in their season comes down to that Ohio State game. They take care of business the next 2 games, they're going to be in the playoff because they'll have the best one in the country. If they lose, which they're going to be probably at least a 7-point underdog. I think that's going to push 10, maybe worse. I don't know. I don't really have anything on Northwestern. They're a dead team. They're fighting, and Northwestern also not a broke team in the Big Ten, given what they spent on Preston Stone. I don't think they'll ever be able to really challenge in the current landscape now that divisions are gone, but it's nice to see them at least trying, more than the Badgers, which segues over to the other games in the Big Ten, which was basically blowout central. Ohio State treated UCLA like Colorado School of Mines, held out, 5 starters in this game, just with a hangnail, basically, or the equivalent of that. And they did that last week against Purdue as well. They're just not treating opponents seriously. They have another cupcake game this week. They should be like 110% by the time they face Michigan. They haven't played anyone in a month. And the same thing is true for Indiana. They were down 5 starters in this game, treated Wisconsin like an FCS team. And Wisconsin had 1 good drive, scored. It looked like it was going to be close. And then Indiana blew them out. And Alberto Mendoza was playing early in the 4th quarter. That is Fernando's brother. So not really too much to be seen. I thought every single Big Ten team that was supposed to blow out their opponent did exactly what we thought.
Oh yeah, and these 2 games right here, this is what you're getting into with both these matchups. I did also hear that Ohio State is probably going to rest more starters this week. From a betting perspective with Indiana, Ohio State, again, I know we have that Michigan game Thanksgiving weekend. It will be interesting to see, the motivation in those 3rd and 4th quarters if they do get up a lot. So I am interested to see the lines as we're looking towards this coming week, especially if there's some larger spreads. It will be interesting to see their motivation, especially if they do start to rest guys. So it actually might be an opportunity to look at the dog sides here, especially again if they do end up resting some guys before those last weeks that we're going to be looking at here.
Absolutely. Not much else, like Penn State played Michigan State, who cares? So as far as Big Ten title races, Indiana has a bye this week. They've already played 11 games and 1 game to go. Ohio State, they're going to play Michigan in 2 weeks. That's basically your Big Ten championship unless something wild happens, which I would not expect, which basically opens the question, again, if the playoffs started today, it would be 3 Big Ten teams the way they have it ranked currently. And that leads to the biggest game next week, which is Oregon-USC, the game of the week. Oregon is currently ranked 8th in the country. With a USC win, they would firmly be in the playoff rankings and maybe even benefit from having that extra week of rest. If USC wins, this team is currently 17th, they would likely vault somewhere near the top 12. And that's where things get maybe a little interesting, depending on how high you would push that team up. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be a very tall order playing that Oregon team this week for USC. And again, Michigan controls their own destiny. With an Ohio State win, they're probably in. But the only way things get weird in this conference is if Michigan wins that final game or USC wins, in my opinion. Otherwise, I think it's basically chalk holds. It's going to be Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana. Anything from you on the playoff or the Big Ten championship?
No, I certainly think we're going to be getting an Indiana-Ohio State matchup in that game specifically. I do think for sure this USC-Oregon game, the winner of that will get that 3rd spot. And I think USC is going to keep it a lot closer than some probably anticipate. I think they're within the last couple weeks, especially they're a better looking team to me than the Trojans. I know it's in Eugene. That's a really tough environment, but I actually am really looking forward to see them match up with Oregon here.
I am too. The biggest worry I have is Oregon had 7 yards per carry on Iowa. What are they going to do to USC? I mean, we'll see about that. Iowa had 5.5 yards per carry against USC in this game. So that's been a problem for them against Notre Dame, Illinois. Any team that can really run the ball has given it to USC. With that said, man, our old boy, Bear Alexander, the well-traveled Bear Alexander is playing really well this year, and he's played well in the last couple games. So who knows? Want to go to the Big 12 or ACC? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I still think, though, if you're looking at this conference and the country as a whole right now, I still think it's USC. No, excuse me, Ohio State. I think there's still such a big gap between one and everyone else right now. You know, I know we'll see Indiana-Ohio State matchup. I think that's going to be a 2-score game when those two play each other. I really do.
Indiana's got to get healthy. They just played 6 games in a row. We talked about it weeks ago. Their Achilles heel was going to be health if it happened. They don't have the depth of Ohio State, so maybe they'll use that bye to their advantage. They don't play a tough game the rest of the way till the championship, so who knows. But let's see what we have next. I forgot what order I put the slides in. All right, we're going to go to the Big 12. Big 12 had one competitive game among teams at or near the top. It was Arizona and Cincinnati. Cincinnati takes an L, a rightful L. Arizona with an 80% post-game win expectancy on a final score of 30-24. Noah Fafita, man. 9.5 yards per attempt, nearly a first down every time the guy threw a pass. You combine that with 2 Cincinnati turnovers, a real struggle in the pass game. I know they didn't have Goody in this game, I believe, was the one that didn't play. So one of their starting receivers, but man, did not think it would affect them that much. Cincinnati's been living dangerously, and it finally catches them here. What'd you see in this game?
I don't have particularly too much on this one here, but I will say it was a bad loss for Cincinnati, pretty much knocking them out of any contention here. Arizona has been a surprise to me. They've done a lot better than what I expected kind of come into this year. But yeah, Cincinnati's been living dangerously. It's been catching up to them as we were seeing yesterday. But good win for Arizona, great game for Fafita. And now Cincinnati's kind of got to go back to the drawing board here.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think this win expectancy was going to be this far because, like Cincinnati throws a pick at their own 25. It was a touchdown immediately. They threw a second one at their own 30. There was a field goal. So they basically handed Arizona 10 points right away. And Arizona missed a field goal like this probably could have. And Arizona had a field goal blocked as well. They missed a field goal and had one blocked. Like, what in the world? So, yeah, I guess, seeing some of that stuff, it shouldn't be that surprising. Arizona was the rightful winner of this game. But, yeah, everything else was kind of blowouts. I was hoping you might get a little chaos in the Big 12. But as far as outcomes go, you had Utah blow out Baylor. You had BYU blow out TCU. You had Texas Tech blow out UCF. It was all of the favorites and teams at the top blowing out their opponents with the exception of this game. So I'll just open it up. Any game you want to talk about in the Big 12 that you saw something in? Just open it up.
I was very impressed with Texas Tech once again. They're taking care of business. BYU, still impressive to me. I know you're not super high on them. I actually bet TCU in that game, so I was a little disappointed. Yeah, that was tough. I thought we were talking about chaos. I thought that was going to be a game right there where we were going to see some chaos. We didn't, but those things happen. But a good, impressive win for them. But everyone else kind of cleaned up where they needed to. Utah looked good. Baylor, another disappointing week. This conference here is certainly going to come down to these final couple weeks, I think.
Big one this week. BYU plays Cincinnati. It's the most impactful game the rest of the way, and it doesn't have anything to do with Cincinnati, but like the SEC and Big Ten, well, not the Big Ten. Big Ten's clear, but like the SEC, there's so many teams in this conference that it's going to come down to tiebreakers. Of course it is, but Texas Tech is locked in essentially. BYU, not a guarantee, but even if they lose, they have a pretty good chance to get in. But the thing is, if they do lose, it opens the door for Utah. So a BYU loss to Cincinnati this week maybe gets you a Utah-Texas Tech Conference Championship. But right now, it's looking pretty likely it's Texas Tech, BYU. And what that does is set up a really hard situation for the Big 12, who at this point, again, all the favorites hold serve the rest of the way. BYU's out if they lose again with 2 losses. And that would be a tough pill to swallow because they would have 2 losses to the same playoff team, Texas Tech, who's on a warpath. But the truth of the matter is they're behind Oklahoma, Texas, Notre Dame, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas Tech, of course, and then the teams at the top. They're behind all of them. Like there's just no path unless one of them loses. And again, Texas plays Texas A&M, so one of them has to lose. But let's say Texas wins. How far are you dropping A&M? Both of them are still ahead of BYU. Texas loses. Okay, maybe BYU jumps up to 10 or 11. They're still out. There's just no path, man. There's no path for this team to get in unless they win the conference or there's chaos. So it's tough being a BYU fan. Like, what are you supposed to do? And the true answer is schedule better. Like, if you don't want to be in the situation, you need to schedule better opponents. And I know this is tough. A lot of these are decided years and years in advance. Conferences have changed. Like, it's not easy. But at the end of the day, BYU played Portland State, Stanford, East Carolina in non-conference. That's not one competitive game. Like, you had the chance. Your conference is a joke. You're going to play one or two good games a year. Outside, and you should have lost a couple of them. So your non-con is exceedingly important. You're not in the SEC. You can't schedule Tarleton State every week. You need to play. You can't be playing an FCS school as BYU. It does nothing for you. And yeah, people will complain like wins mean nothing these days. That's not true. They mean something because you need to beat Portland State. You lose, you're dead immediately, week one. Now they won that game. You get nothing from it as a victor, but you can't lose it. They just don't have a path, man, unless they go undefeated or win their conference. It's just the state of the Big 12. And to your ADs, whoever's making decisions in your conference, quit scheduling Portland State. Schedule a competent opponent because you've done yourself no favors. You're in a lose-lose situation the whole season. Sorry for my rant. Anything else on that or in the Big 12?
That's a very justified rant right there. And I think the conference as a whole, they don't do a very good job of scheduling non-cons anyway. So I know BYU is kind of the punching bag here in this scenario, but the conference itself, you don't see a lot of great non-cons in the first couple weeks of the season. So I think for the Big 12, it's going to be a tough situation because you're probably getting one team in. But if you look years beyond this year specifically, they need to do a much better job of scheduling these non-cons. Because again, like you said, a Portland State win, a Kennesaw State win, nothing against those teams, but it's not really doing much to help your playoff case at all.
Dude, Wake Forest is playing Delaware this week.
Yeah. There's a lot of weird non-cons this week. The SEC has like 5 really bad games.
Well, the thing with the SEC is you're playing 9 or 8 in there, soon to be 9. You're playing 8, soon to be 9, really hard games a year. And regardless of what you think about like Arkansas or Kentucky, like you're never 31-point favorites over those teams. Like Ohio State is every week. That's not against Michigan or something. Or, like, I don't know. I mean, Wake Forest is going to be a pretty big favorite this week, and they're playing Delaware, who's a decent team in Conference USA, but it just is what it is. If you want to do yourself favors down the stretch as a Big 12 or ACC team, you can schedule one of these games, but you can't have all 3 be these horrible teams. You just can't. Anyway, that's my rant. If BYU loses, the path opens for Utah, which would, I think, be exciting just because I think Utah is a better team. And Utah and BYU are ranked neck and neck. Both of their paths are basically win the conference or hope for chaos. So anything else here before I get pissed off again?
I'm kind of right there with you for one, because I do have a Utah future for the Big 12. And two, BYU has looked pretty good. I personally don't want to see them play Texas Tech again because I think it's going to be the same story that we already saw. Again, I know it's hard to beat a team twice, but I don't particularly want to see that matchup again.
Yeah, me either. Actually, I might bet it. So maybe
I would absolutely bet that for sure.
All right, let's go to ACC, which has the same problems as Big 12, only worse because the best team in their conference is not live to make the title game, according to the rankings, which would be Miami, who just annihilated NC State. Classic Miami story with them is, Crystal Ball loses 1 or 2 games he shouldn't every year and puts himself in this position and puts the committee in a tough position because now you have teams like Georgia Tech at the top. You have like a Virginia at the top. But according to the committee, Miami is still ahead of them. So, so the problem with this conference is like it's probably going to be Georgia Tech, Virginia. Both of them got wins. They weren't the prettiest, especially Georgia Tech's. Now, it was 60% with a 2-point win over Boston College. Like, congratulations for outlasting a team that does not have a conference win yet. Georgia Tech's done that all season. They should have lost to Wake Forest. They should have 2 losses right now, or 3 losses. They have 2 or 1. Anyway, let's just say everything holds serve here. Georgia Tech makes the conference championship against Virginia. Let's just say Virginia wins out because they're the second most likely team to make it. If Virginia loses a conference championship game, which you're supposed to be rewarded for playing in your conference championship, they're still behind Miami, who's essentially been idle since their last loss. So the Miami ranking complicates things even more because if you're going to get an at-large team in, it's Miami, which would require just epic amounts of chaos in this conference. So right away, ACC is locked into one berth no matter who it is, unless like 4 SEC teams lose in the next 2 weeks. So I don't know. The most interesting result was the Georgia Tech win. It basically locks them up to play in this title game. I didn't think it was a good win. Their defense is a huge problem. Allowed 9 yards per pass attempt to Lonergan and 6.7 yards per carry to Boston College. Like, they're going to get boat raced in the first round. Anything? I'll just open it up to you because it was a very lackluster week in this conference.
Interesting point with Crystal Ball. So with Miami being ranked top 10 under Crystal Ball, they've lost more games outright under Crystal Ball as a top 10 team who's favored than anyone else in the past 5 years. So that's a horrendous stat. That's been a Crystal Ball theme here these past few years, but nothing else really from me in the ACC. Again, kind of the Georgia Tech game was awful. They came out with the win, but again, their defense is a disaster right now. Again, I am right there with you. I think they are going to absolutely get boat raced in the first round. Whoever that's going to be that they're going to play. Virginia, tough win. Duke's a good team, so I actually really like what I saw there. Did you happen to watch that Clemson game Friday night? It was a mess. So many missed field goals.
It was a huge mess.
Huge mess.
And Clemson, their post-game win expectancy was 13%. 13%. Louisville nearly doubled them up in yards here too.
They couldn't lose that game. Louisville, they couldn't have lost the game. They did. They blew any sort of chances the rest of the way here.
That loss opened things up for Miami a little more because Louisville was the biggest threat to the Hurricanes. But yeah, now you have a mess of a conference and people are going to be like, you're not rewarding wins. Well, it's like, yeah, what are we supposed to do? Reward Virginia's win over Coastal Carolina, William and Mary, or Washington State? Like, that's what they did in non-con. Miami beat Notre Dame. Like, I don't care if Virginia has one less loss than Miami. They're a worse team by a lot. Like, this is why the ranking is what it is. Yes, you need to reward wins, but you can't reward William and Mary or Coastal Carolina in the Sun Belt with their backup quarterback in the game. Or God forbid, Washington State. So like, that's why Virginia's ranked so low and why they're dead to make the playoff unless they win the conference. The whole conference did this in non-con with the exception of Florida State. Not good enough. Louisville, kind of. They played James Madison at least. And Miami, really. Like, there's a few other good non-con games, but like, you just can't do this. So basically, we're locked in to Georgia Tech, Virginia, unless Pitt does something weird. SMU does something weird, but it's still going to require a loss. And I don't know. It's kind of a weird situation. Do you think anyone is live in this conference to do anything? Because I really don't.
I actually do think Miami's going to probably end up winning the conference. We
don't really have a path to get in, though.
I would love a Miami-Georgia Tech game, though. I think that would be fun. I think it'd be a shootout. But I think it'd be fun.
Miami needs a lot of help to make the title game. A lot.
And it's interesting you bring that up because when you're looking at these playoff shows every week right now, last week they still had Miami in. So they were projecting them to win somehow, some way right now. So I know ESPN really likes Miami. They like the Hurricanes this year. But I would actually be pretty excited about a Miami Georgia Tech championship game. I personally would.
So would I, but I'm just like confused how the playoff shows are doing that. Like, how do you First of all, how do you get him? How do you get him in the title game, and then how do you get him in the playoff? They're ranked.
They would pretty much just need chaos to ensue with those top 4 teams right now. They would have to.
They're ranked 15th, man. They're behind Vanderbilt.
Because who's Virginia had? They got to play Virginia Tech the last week. No, they don't have a very hard schedule.
Virginia's on a bye, so they have one game left. It's Virginia Tech.
That's what I thought. Yeah. So you never know what could happen, but I mean, Miami certainly does need a lot of help.
A ton.
And we talk about the schedules. Miami, that's a team. Great idea playing Notre Dame week 1 because if you win, that's a great non-con win right there. If you lose, close, still a good loss right there against a very good
it's the
team.
Only thing keeping them alive.
Mm-hmm. So that was a phenomenal scheduling job for Miami right there. Phenomenal.
It's the only thing keeping them alive. Mm-hmm. Anyway. Let's touch on the G5 because, a G5 team does need to make the playoff. We do not discriminate. I love the G5. The Sun Belt is my favorite conference, and MAC is number 2 for me. But the biggest upsets, if you will, kind of, not really, came in the American. And the first one, Navy knocks off South Florida. Navy does it with a 37% post-game win expectancy. But man, Blake Horvath can really spin it for a triple option quarterback, an arm first quarterback. This Navy team can actually throw the ball on you. And it's not just the occasional lull him to sleep bomb over the top. Like, he has legitimate quarterback numbers. And then they still do everything on the ground. Navy's pretty banged up right now. Heidenreich was questionable for this game. Horvath was out. Horvath left at one point. And there is a drop-off when you go back to Braxton Woodson because he can't throw the ball. So, impressive win. I don't know, man. It kind of looked like the option was really confusing South Florida. And sometimes it's as simple as that, which, seems really elementary. But South Florida doesn't have a fantastic defense. It's definitely better than what they put on the field. That was my kind of back of the napkin diagnosis. What'd you see here?
So the option's hard to defend. It's hard when you have 1 week of prep, right? So if you have a game where you're playing an option team week 1 of the year, you have an entire offseason to prep for that game. But you have a USF team, they got 6 days to prep for a Navy option. So that can be very tough. Again, I know we can say it's elementary, but I mean, if you do not know how to defend it, it's a very tough situation. Looking at this game as a whole, I don't know if you can make the case of it was a good Navy win or a bad USF loss. They certainly could not have lost that game, and they did. Touching on Horvath, I don't really think enough people really give him the credit that he deserves. He should be, he won't win it, but I think he should be a top 10 Heisman candidate right now. I believe he still is in terms of odds on all the books, but very good job for Navy getting that win yesterday. But definitely disaster struck for USF.
USF had the best playoff odds of the G5, so they're dead now. They're probably dead. They are dead to make the title game because there's so many one-loss teams in this conference. Another team that was, I think, second in playoff odds was Memphis, and they drop a game to East Carolina. East Carolina storms the field as 3-point favorites, have some class. But East Carolina now sitting with 1 loss too. I mean, Brennan Lewis, man, the guy is such a warrior. He was just limping all over the field. I felt bad for him. And when they said he was going to play, I took a Memphis ticket, had him +3. They lose by 1 in the betting markets. But if I would have known that's what Brennan Lewis, and he still played reasonably well, but if I would have known that's what he was going to look like, I think I probably would have stayed away from the game, as I have with a lot of Memphis games. But they're now dead. So you're sitting with Navy 1 loss, Tulane 1 loss, North Texas 1 loss, East Carolina 1 loss in this conference. Again, they keep adding teams every year. Tiebreakers. The 2 most likely teams, the most likely game is Tulane, North Texas right now because of the tiebreakers and who they play the rest of the way. I'll open this up to you with any games you want to talk about in the American or just conference futures.
No, I think that would be a phenomenal conference championship right there. North Texas is, to me, I think the best team right now in the American. So I would actually really love that matchup. But yeah, I wouldn't probably play any futures specifically right now. I would probably look more towards that game when it does happen. But that is probably what we're gonna get. But if you look at the standings, it is another weird situation where you have to deal with just a bunch of tiebreakers. So I mean, I'm looking forward to these last couple weeks, seeing how everything kind of shakes out. But if that is the matchup we're getting, I think that would be fantastic for that conference right there.
I agree. And if you look at the standings, you'll say, oh, Navy's first in the standings. Navy has played 1 more conference game than both Tulane and North Texas, so they just have an extra win because they played an extra game. Obviously, Tulane and North Texas have the ability to make that up the next 2 weeks, and they hold tiebreakers over Navy, assuming everything goes according to plan. So that's how Navy ends up not in the championship. I don't know. We'll see. But before I want to talk about the G5 as a playoff, as like a collective. So I'm going to skip over the Mountain West for just a second and talk about the Sun Belt, where we have James Madison, who is the next most likely team, maybe even the most likely team to make the playoff now because of what USF and Memphis did. James Madison absolutely pounded App State. And the game we have on the screen is Southern Miss because they got upset. They just quickly on that, Southern Miss held out Braylon Braxton at the 9th hour. So Southern Miss had a backup quarterback in there. And they absolutely get blasted in the turnover battle and lose a really competitive game, which kind of sets up James Madison for maybe an even easier conference championship game when they get there. And right now, with the American cannibalizing itself, as long as this James Madison team doesn't slip up, they have a pretty good shot to get in, it seems like. What do you think about the Sun Belt in general and James Madison?
I'll tell you what, and I know we touched on in the preseason, I am absolutely kicking myself. I did not play James Madison playoff future. And that was my team in the preseason. That was my team. I loved them in the preseason. I love what they're doing now. They're annihilating everyone, and they score 1 million points. So they're, from a viewer perspective, they're so fun to watch. I think the way they keep playing, and again, with the American cannibalizing itself, I think they probably are going to be the team that gets in. And I'd probably look to playing a James Madison spread in that championship game as well, with the way they've been playing.
So they're 2 touchdown favorites over Washington State. They got a non-con game this week. They play Coastal Carolina in the final week, who just lost their quarterback. We'll see. I don't know if Samari Collier is going to be healthy by that time. Coastal Carolina lost that game, who was probably the biggest threat to them on their side of the conference. But right now, it looks like the championship is still probably going to be Southern Miss. Southern Miss plays Troy, who's in second position on that side of the conference. So it looks like it's going to be a JMU versus Southern Miss or Troy, depending on how things shake out. Again, Southern Miss plays Troy in that final week to determine. It's essentially an elimination game for
Troy. Looks bad right now, too.
Yeah, Troy they got back their quarterback, Goose Crowder. They tried to throw him in the fire right away, and they just got slaughtered by Old Dominion. I think they lost 33-0, 31-0. At least 30.
I bet Old Dominion that game, so I was certainly happy.
Yeah, that was a great bet by you. I held off like a coward. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. And James Madison played Louisville in the non-con and covered a spread against them. Barely, but they still covered, so it counts. Interested in James Madison in the playoff. My biggest concern would be Barnett and their passing game, but I don't know. Kind of would depend on their draw. They're likely going to get slaughtered if they make it, but they're a cool story. So I like James Madison. Hopefully they get in. As far as the Mountain West, the biggest game there was Boise State, San Diego State. Boise State using their backup Max Cutforth, who is awful, and Boise State has a 52% post-game win expectancy. They still find a way to lose by 10 points. San Diego State, man, this team just continually greases out wins. Jaden Denegal averaged 1.7 yards per pass in this game. 1.7 yards per pass. He threw like 9 passes in the entire game. They tried to just run the ball every single play. And against this version of Boise State with the backup quarterback, that was enough, that's just a wild run out. The Mountain West, if you're staying up for these games, you have more bravery than me right now, because this is just really, really gross at times. You were awake. You always are.
I do watch way too much late night football. I really do. But I was impressed with San Diego State for one. Their defensive performance last week, their ability to bounce back against the Boise State team who playing the backup quarterback, but not an awful football team. So I was certainly impressed with what I saw there. I do think they're going to end up just running away with this conference. But I mean, if you look at the standings, there are still some interesting spots, and there are 5 teams with 2 losses right now. One of the teams I do think that we should still keep an eye on, I know we touched on a little bit last week, is New Mexico. And they picked up a big win yesterday as well.
Yeah, they're definitely alive. UNLV got by in overtime, so they're still alive. The way this conference sets up right now, you have basically half the conference with 2 losses, San Diego State with 1, and then the teams that don't have 1 or 2 losses basically have 0 or like 1 win, something like that. So there's a very clear tiering system in this conference. Like you're either awful or you're pretty good. So a lot's going to be decided these next 2 weeks. A lot of these teams do play each other. So unlike the ACC and the Big 12, it's not the biggest conference. Things are going to be settled on the field probably before the end of this season. As far as our other 2 conferences, the MACtion is back. It was a really exciting slate of weekday games. It's where I made most of my money this week. The big results were Ohio and Western Michigan. Western Michigan getting a win. They currently sit in first place, the only team with 1 loss in the MAC. Toledo beat Miami, Ohio. I ended up getting very lucky in this game when news to us, DeQuan Finn quit. He's preparing for the NFL as if he's going to get drafted. So basically they trot out Henry Hessen and they're not even live from the first snap of the game. So Toledo gets a win over Miami, Ohio, which puts them back in position to make some noise here. The other teams that are looking pretty good, Ohio still at 2 losses. Even with that loss, Central Michigan picked up a win, putting them at 4-2. Buffalo, I don't know what they're doing, but somehow they're still 4-2. And even Miami, Ohio with the losses at 4-2. A lot still to be decided. The next 2 weeks of action are going to be awesome. What'd you see here?
Well, interesting that DeQuan Finn did end up quitting because he's been in college since I was in college. So that was interesting. I was kind of news to me as well, but I had a decent Maction week. I had the same plays as you. So if anything, a lot of these games came down to the wire, which were pretty exciting. So I think with weekday football, you're going to get a lot of erratic endings, a lot of unpredictability there as well. So I'm looking forward to these next couple weeks with these MAC games. But just kind of touching on the G5 as a whole, I certainly think the American and then the Mountain West as conferences, I think they've certainly overachieved with what we were going to get from a lot of these teams this year. I don't know what you think about that, but I certainly think in terms of just performance on the field, we've certainly seen both those conferences overachieve.
Yeah, I would agree. I hadn't thought about that. I need to think about it a little more. But, I mean, there's a lot of good records in those conferences. I would have to go back and look at the non-cons and see. But, like just off the top of my head, there were definitely some like weird games, some close ones. Some of the G5 teams played really well. Like, I don't know why this one stuck out to me. Like even Kennesaw State playing Wake Forest to a 1-point game. Some of that might just be trying to preserve your players for conference play. We've seen multiple teams do that even of late. Like Navy just did that against Notre Dame, which apparently really benefited them because they go out and upset South Florida, which was just a vastly more important game for them. But yeah, I don't disagree. It's been the Mountain West, man. There's just been a weird conference overall.
It's
I don't know
tough
what to make of that.
And you do have, I mean, again, you have teams like New Mexico, Hawaii, they're playing really good football this year that I wasn't really expecting. So it's certainly an erratic conference. It's not elite by any means, but I mean, you certainly do just get fun football and some also really good betting spots as well.
Yeah, a lot of different styles of play out there too. It's definitely fun to watch. I usually fall asleep during it. The only other conference was Conference USA. The big game of the week, Jacksonville State and Kennesaw. Jacksonville State got a win. I had eyes on this game, but it was in the quad box it was at the same time as Texas, Georgia. So I can't say I played super close attention to it. I did see that Kennesaw used 2 QBs and Amari Odom's been hurt a lot this year. So I wonder how much injury affected that game. But Jacksonville State in the driver's seat. And now you have Western Kentucky and Kennesaw State tied for second because Missouri State was the same record as Kennesaw's ineligible in their first year. So no matter how well Missouri State does, they can't make it. So this is going to come down to probably Jacksonville State versus Western Kentucky, Kennesaw. Anything here?
That was actually a huge win for Jacksonville State. For one, I did play Jacksonville State in that game, so I was certainly satisfied with the result. But 7-game win streak snapped for Kennesaw. That was absolutely insane. You turned the ball over as much as they did. They threw 4 picks. And they also had 10 penalties for 90 yards. So certainly a very messy game for Kennesaw. Good win for Jacksonville State. Puts them in the driver's seat now. Yeah, really like what I saw from them there. I had a couple. I saw a decent amount of this game. I did have some eyes on it, so that was very nice to see as well. But yeah, big win. Certainly overachieving for Kennesaw State this year as well, if we're talking about that.
Yeah, go Kennesaw. Second year in FBS. Go out.
They've been impressive. The Missouri State rule I don't love. I mean, I know you got to follow that rule with that team, the bridge year from the FCS to the FBS, but they've won 5 in a row as well. So certainly some good things that I've seen from them.
Yeah, watch them in their final week of the year. That'll be their version of a bowl game. Well, that's not necessarily true. Delaware and Missouri State can make a bowl if there's not enough eligible teams. If. That happens sometimes. And usually
it happened a couple times last year.
It happened 2 years ago when Rice got in. I don't think there was anyone who jumped up to FBS that year. So then if there's no newcomers that have bowl, for whatever reason, like as soon as bowl eligibility, they don't have the right amount of teams, which just happens randomly sometimes depending on win-loss. If it happens, like first things first, if there's someone that's jumping off the FBS who's eligible or would have been eligible, they give it to them. And then if not, it goes to like the academic rule. So Rice gets a leg up on that, which is how they got admitted one year. I don't know. It's a weird system. I don't know why you just don't let Delaware and Missouri State compete if they make it. But anyway, that does it for me. But I know you always have extra action in the FCS, so opening the floor to you.
I played 2 this week. So I played Idaho plus 3.5. They've actually been, out of all the bets I've placed this year, Idaho has been my most profitable team by far. I believe I'm actually 6-1 betting with them, so they've been a lot of fun. One I got really excited about when I saw the line. I know we were talking about it this week. The the Tennessee Tech game. They ended up getting annihilated, and that closed at 23.5. Yeah.
Wait. What was the post game on that?
It wasn't great.
I had it.
Yeah. It was.
Dude, I think they should have covered.
They should have.
Okay, what was the spread?
It was 20. It closed at 23.5.
And the margin was 32.
Mm-hmm.
Average margin of victory or adjusted margin of victory, 21.9. You should have had a cover in this game. You should have had a cover.
If we had a vote for Wagon of the Year, at the end of the year, my vote's by far Idaho. They've been phenomenal. Again, these lines are sometimes hard to find because sometimes you don't see them on books until like 10 minutes before kickoff. So I got to go and do research throughout the week to see where some of the lines are probably going to be at before I end up making the decision on them. But I've been loving betting on them. They've been so much fun. But the games are usually late. Sure. So they're also hard to watch sometimes. But they're not a bad team. They're not going to make the playoffs in the FCS, just their record. Because they actually have had a really hard non-con. They played a couple FBS teams, but they've been fun. They've been a fun betting team this year.
Go Vandals. I have a shirt from back in the day when they were FBS before they decided to back down.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I don't have any look aheads yet because a little far behind on the slate. Not too far behind. Because normally I run my model an hour before the show or so. Some stuff going on in my personal life this weekend. If we had the show pushed back like an hour, probably would have been ready. But don't have anything yet. Do you have anything?
The only real look ahead I was thinking about was that Oregon USC game. I believe it's at 9.5 right now. I would be very, very interested in playing an Oregon side, a USC side, if that got to 10. So that's my only real look ahead right now. I'll do a little more of a deep dive as we go through the week here, but in terms of actual spots, that's my only real one right now.
All right. Well, thank you everyone in the chat who came and hung out with us. Very much appreciate you guys going and taking some time out of your day. I forgot to say one very important thing. So before we close the show, if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Have to get that in for YouTube. So sorry, guys. But anyway, thank you all for being here. Nate, where can the people find you if you want them to find you?
I'll drop my Twitter and everything in the chat.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, guys. We'll be back again next week. But until then, good luck. Let's enjoy week 13.